I didn't understand what push forward meant until I watched it happen with my own eyes. At first, it looked like panic. People running, streets clogging, sirens converging on the same intersections until everything became noise. That was the human part. The part I didn't expect was what came after the panic burned off. When the crowds thinned, the cars ran out of gas, and the city's constant motion finally slowed. That's when I saw them in daylight, not sprinting, not swarming like in bad movies, but moving like pressure in a pipe. They didn't need speed. They didn't need intelligence the way we define it. They just needed one thing, to keep going, one step after another toward sound, toward light, toward the places we always gather without thinking. Hospitals, grocery stores, transit centers, police stations, big box stores with glass doors, apartment lobbies with intercom buzzers that kept chirping because someone, somewhere, was still pressing buttons. They pushed forward because everything else stopped. My name is Nate Caldwell. Before everything broke, I was a field service technician for building automation systems, temperature control, ventilation, access control, fire panels, backup power monitoring. I wasn't a hero, not a soldier, not even the kind of person who owned camping gear beyond a cheap flashlight and a half-used first aid kit. My job was to show up with a laptop, a tool bag, and a calm voice, fix things people didn't understand, and leave before anyone asked me to sit through a meeting. That job put me in mechanical rooms, rooftops, basements, and loading docks all over eastern Pennsylvania and New Jersey. It meant I knew how buildings breathed. I knew what happened when power flickered, when pumps stopped, when filters clogged, when doors failed open or failed locked. I knew which systems were supposed to keep people safe, and what happened when those systems had nobody left to maintain them. I didn't plan to survive because I was strong. I survived because I understood infrastructure, and I understood something else too. Panic makes people run toward the wrong things. I started out in Philadelphia on an ordinary weekday that turned into a citywide shutdown in less than 12 hours. I'm not saying that as a dramatic line. I mean literal shutdown. Traffic lights blinking red, buses stranded across lanes, train service halted, cell networks overloaded, and then thinning out like a weak radio signal drifting out of range. It began with the alerts. The first one hit my phone mid-morning, while I was standing in a chilled mechanical room below a medical office building near University City, checking a variable frequency drive on a chilled water pump. The drive had been throwing overcurrent alarms, and the building was complaining that half the floors were warm. My phone buzzed through my jeans, and when I glanced at the screen, I saw a push notification about unusual public disturbances in multiple cities, with a reminder to stay aware and follow official guidance. That kind of message had become normal over the years. Storms, protests, random emergencies. I ignored it the way everyone ignores those things until they're forced not to. Then the second alert came. And the third. The building's receptionist, a woman named Trish who always wore bright sneakers and had a laugh you could hear from the hallway, came down the stairs and stuck her head into the mechanical room. "Hey," she called, voice tight, not joking. "You seeing this?" I wiped my hands on a rag and followed her up. The lobby TV, usually set to weather or some daytime talk show, was on a local news station. The anchor's face looked different. Not excited, not dramatic, but strained in a way I'd only seen during real disasters. A split screen showed shaky phone video from somewhere downtown. People moving fast, some stumbling, some yelling, others frozen in place as if they couldn't decide whether it was safer to run or to stand still. The caption said there were unexplained attacks and mass medical emergencies. They were using careful words, the kind used when nobody wants to be the first person to say something that can't be taken back. A doctor in scrubs pushed through the lobby, walking fast, phone pressed to her ear. A security guard stood near the doors, hand on his radio, listening hard. Trish looked at me and whispered, "Is it like a riot?" I didn't answer right away. The video didn't look like a riot. There were no signs, no lines of police, no organized motion. It looked like someone had opened a valve and the street had turned into confusion. People weren't fighting over a cause. They were reacting to a threat they couldn't name. I said, "I don't know." My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't a news alert. It was my supervisor, Raoul. "Where are you?" he asked when I answered. His voice was clipped, the way it got when a job was running long. "University City," I said. "Medical office, pump drive issue. I'm basically done." "Wrap it," he said. "Get back east. Don't take I-76 if you can avoid it. There's something going on near the hospital district and the Schuylkill ramps are getting jammed. Our dispatcher says some sites are locking down." "Locking down for what?" He hesitated, like he didn't want to speak the words. "Just do it. Get home, and keep your radio on." I didn't have a radio. I had a phone. But I understood what he meant. When someone says keep your radio on, they mean the situation is moving faster than official updates. I finished my sign-off paperwork without making eye contact with anyone. The building engineer, an older guy named Marty, who normally liked to talk about boilers like they were sports cars, barely looked at my work order. He was staring at the lobby TV and tapping his keys as if he was trying to pull up security camera feeds. I walked out to my van and sat behind the wheel without starting it. I did that thing people do when the world starts to tilt. Double-check seatbelt, adjust mirrors, touch the steering wheel like it's an anchor. Then I drove. The first big mistake I made was trying to go home. Home was a second-floor apartment in a row house near Port Richmond. It had a decent door and windows that faced a narrow street. It had food for maybe a week. It had no real way to secure the building beyond a deadbolt. And it was in the middle of a neighborhood that would do what every neighborhood does in a crisis: flood the streets with people searching for answers. As I drove, the city shifted. At first, it was just traffic. Then it was traffic with horns that didn't stop. Then it was people standing in the road, waving arms, trying to get drivers to stop, shouting things I couldn't make out through closed windows. A SEPTA bus sat skewed across a lane near an intersection, doors open, nobody stepping off. A man ran past it with his backpack bouncing, looking over his shoulder so often he nearly tripped. I kept my doors locked. That's not paranoia. That's habit. Service techs learn quickly. You lock your van because your tools are your paycheck. You lock your van because opportunity walks on two legs. I hit a red light and watched two police cars blast through the intersection. One of them clipped a curb, corrected, and kept going like the driver didn't even feel it. That was the moment something cold settled in my chest. Police don't drive like that unless they're either chasing something urgent or running away from something worse. My phone signal flickered between bars. Texts began to come through out of order. Friends checking in, a cousin in Cherry Hill saying, Schools were holding kids until parents arrive. My neighbor texting that the corner store was closing because something happened near the bridge. I tried calling my mom. It went straight to voicemail. I tried calling again. Busy. I pulled up Waze out of habit. The map looked like a rash. Red congestion lines everywhere. Accidents reported. Road closures popping up faster than the app could refresh. I wasn't seeing a single clean route across the city. Everything was converging into a mess. I made a decision I didn't fully understand at the time. I stopped following the instinct to go toward familiar comfort, and instead I drove toward a place I knew had layers between me and the street. I drove toward my company's storage yard. It was a fenced lot in an industrial stretch near the river, a place where we kept spare parts, conduit, wire, and, most importantly, a backup generator trailer we used for temporary power during outages and equipment swap-outs. I knew the lock codes. I knew the layout. I knew there was a small office trailer with a metal door and window shutters. It wasn't a fortress, but it was better than an apartment with a thin door and people pounding on every entrance. The yard gate was closed when I reached it, but the padlock was our own. I pulled up, jumped out, and keyed in the code. My hands were shaking enough that I had to punch it twice. Inside, the yard felt like a different planet. The city noise was muted by stacked pallets and shipping containers. The air smelled like diesel and wet asphalt. My van rolled across gravel and I parked near the office trailer. That's when I heard the first sustained sound that wasn't traffic or sirens. An uneven chorus of voices, distant but rising, like a crowd. I climbed onto the trailer steps and looked through the small office window. No one inside. The lights were off. The power was out. I unlocked the door and stepped into the stale air. The office was exactly what it always was. A cheap desk, a whiteboard with inventory notes, a dusty microwave, a folding chair that always pinched your legs. There was a wall map of the region with pushpins marking service sites. A paper calendar hung crookedly. I shut the door behind me and listened. Outside, the crowd noise shifted. It wasn't one crowd. It was a moving pressure wave. Sound bending around buildings and narrowing streets. I went to the trailer's small back room and found the two radios we kept for jobs. They were basic UHF handhelds, the kind used on construction sites. They weren't magic, but they didn't rely on cell towers. I grabbed one, turned it on, and scanned through the channels. At first, nothing but static and faint voices. Then, on one channel, I caught a clear transmission. Repeat, if you're in the area of Frankfurt and Aramingo, do not approach the intersection. Do not. Static swallowed the rest. Another voice came in, sharp, possibly a private security team. We have doors secured. We have people inside, but they keep pressing forward. They're not responding. The voice cut off, replaced by a steady hiss. They keep pressing forward. I swallowed and forced myself to think like a technician, not like a scared person. What do I have here? A fenced yard, containers and equipment that can act as barriers, a trailer office with a metal door, a generator trailer with fuel. Spare tools, and a city outside that is changing by the minute. I didn't have time to build something elaborate. I needed layers. Delay, visibility, control. I moved fast. I pulled 2 rolling steel storage racks from near the gate and shoved them into position in front of the trailer steps, leaving a narrow path for me but creating a noisy obstacle for anyone, or anything, trying to rush the door. I dragged pallets and stacked them in a staggered line. Not a wall, but a jagged maze. I wasn't trying to stop a vehicle. I was trying to slow movement and force sound. Then I checked the yard's perimeter. The chain-link fence was tall, topped with angled extensions. It wasn't impossible to climb, but it wasn't easy. The gates had locks. There were 2 entry points, the main sliding gate and a smaller pedestrian gate on the far side. I secured the pedestrian gate with a length of chain and a lock from our hardware crate. I didn't do it because I thought a lock could stop a determined human. I did it because locks buy seconds, and seconds let you make decisions. I returned to the office trailer, shut the metal door, and sat at the desk with my breathing loud in my ears. Then I wrote, because writing made my hands stop shaking. On a notepad, I listed what I needed: water, food, battery power, information, a longer-term plan. I also wrote something else because it was the only honest sentence I could form. Do not go back to the apartment. The first night was a lesson in how fast normal disappears. From the trailer window, I watched the industrial street outside fill with movement. Not a flood at first, just scattered figures drifting down the road like they were following a scent. Some were limping. Some were walking with a stiff, forward-leaning posture like exhausted commuters. Some carried nothing at all. None of them were talking to each other. When they made noise, it wasn't conversation. It was a low, repetitive sound, like irritation or hunger without words. I didn't use the radio much that night. The more I listened, the worse it got. Every channel carried fragments, a dispatcher telling units to avoid certain corridors, a building manager begging someone to send help, a strained voice describing people not stopping, not responding, pushing forward even when they should have collapsed. My mind tried to label them as sick, drugged, violent, but the pattern didn't match normal violence. Normal violence has tactics: fear, anger. It has pauses. It has negotiation, even if it's ugly. This was pressure. At around 2 a.m., the crowd noise shifted closer. The sound rolled in like a tide, then ebbed, then surged again. I watched the yard gate and the street beyond. A cluster of figures drifted into view under a broken streetlight. They moved past the gate without stopping, drawn to something farther down the block. Maybe a car alarm. Maybe a screaming person. Maybe just the echo of their own movement funneling them forward. Then one of them turned its head toward the yard. It wasn't a dramatic snap. It was a slow, almost curious movement. The figure stepped closer to the fence, hands brushing the chain links. It leaned in. The face was pale under the streetlight. The eyes looked unfocused, like someone half awake. The mouth opened slightly, not in a scream, but in a steady exhale. It pressed its hands against the fence and began to push. Not hard at first, just consistent. The fence bowed a fraction. The figure didn't stop. It pushed forward like a machine that didn't know it was supposed to quit. Two more figures drifted closer, drawn by the first one's movement. They pressed against the fence too. Their shoulders and hands made a soft rattling sound as metal vibrated. I backed away from the window and turned off the interior light. In the dark, the rattling continued. It wasn't frantic. It was persistent, like someone leaning on a door while waiting to be let in. I understood the danger right then. A single person pushing is nothing. 10 people pushing is noise. 100 people pushing is force. And force doesn't care about locks or fear. Force turns barriers into bending points. I stayed awake until the rattling faded. It faded not because they got tired, but because something else pulled them forward down the street. The pressure wave moved on. When morning came, the city looked wrong. The sky was the same, the light was the same, but the streets were littered with stalled cars, and the air had that quiet you only hear after a storm, when everyone who can leave has already left, and everyone who can't is hiding. My phone finally had signal, but it was weak. I got one voicemail from my mother, left hours earlier, her voice strained but controlled. "Nate, I don't know what's going on. I'm staying inside. Don't come here. Don't drive. Just stay safe. Call me if you can." I called back. It didn't connect. I sat on the trailer steps inside the yard, drank warm water from a bottle I'd found in my van, and watched the industrial block with my eyes scanning like I was on a job site looking for hazards. In my world, hazards were things like live electrical panels, spinning fan blades, ammonia leaks in a refrigeration room. Now, the hazard walked in daylight. I knew I couldn't stay in the yard long term. The generator trailer had fuel, but fuel runs out. The office trailer had no real insulation. The yard had no water source beyond whatever I could haul in. If a big enough pressure wave gathered against the fence, it could fail. I needed a place built to handle crowds without relying on human calm. A place with thick doors, multiple layers, and ideally its own water. A place I knew well. My mind went to one location so fast it felt like an instinct. A municipal water treatment facility. Not the main one across the river, but a smaller pumping station and filtration site I'd serviced twice in the past year. It was part of the region's water infrastructure, with reinforced doors, fenced perimeter, backup generators, chemical storage rooms, and, most importantly, access to water that could be made safe if you knew the process. It also had something else: elevation and visibility. The facility sat on the edge of an industrial park near the Delaware, with a service road and a controlled entry gate. Inside, it had a control room with monitors, and a maintenance workshop with tools and spare parts. It wasn't a perfect refuge, but it was built to keep critical systems running during chaos. And I knew the lockbox code, because I'd been the one to update the access control panel firmware last time. I packed like a technician packing for a long call. Tool bag, multi-bit screwdriver, adjustable wrench, wire cutters, headlamp, spare batteries, duct tape, zip ties, a small multimeter, food, whatever ours was in the yard's emergency cabinet, protein bars, a couple of cans of soup, crackers, water. Every bottle I could find, plus a couple empty jugs to fill later. Communication, 2 handheld radios, plus a spare battery pack. Defense, I didn't have fantasies. I had reality. I found a heavy pry bar, a hard hat, safety glasses, work gloves. I also found a compact fire extinguisher. Not because I planned to fight a fire, but because a blast of powder to the face can buy distance without turning the world into something I didn't want to describe. In my van's glove box, I had a legally owned compact handgun I carried sometimes when I had to work late in rough areas. I had it because the world used to be the kind of place where danger came from people making choices. I didn't take it out to feel brave. I took it out to be honest about what I might face. I checked the magazine, kept my finger off the trigger, and put it away where I could reach it without fumbling. Then I drove. I avoided major roads. I stuck to industrial streets, service alleys, and routes that ran along warehouses. Every time I saw a cluster of stalled cars, I turned away. Every time I heard sustained noise, Shouting, alarms, crashing, I rerouted. The infected, because that's the word my brain settled on, the only one that fit without turning my stomach, weren't everywhere evenly. They gathered where sound and people gathered. I saw them near a convenience store with its doors propped open, drifting in and out like confused shoppers. I saw them clustered at a bus stop where a digital sign still glowed, and they stood under it like it meant something. They pushed forward in lines sometimes, like they were following the same invisible track. Twice, I had to stop the van and sit absolutely still as a pressure wave moved past an intersection ahead. The group wasn't running, but it was dense, shoulder to shoulder in places, and their movement had that steady insistence that made my palms sweat. I watched them from behind my windshield, engine off. They didn't look at the cars. They didn't search. They moved like current. When the road cleared, I started the van and rolled forward slowly, tires crunching on debris. At the water facility gate, I found the first sign that infrastructure was becoming a trap. The entry gate was closed, as expected, but the keypad box was smashed. The metal housing hung open, wires exposed. Someone had tried to force access and failed, then gotten angry. I parked a short distance away and listened. No sirens, no shouting, just the faint hum of wind and distant alarms. I approached the gate on foot, tool bag over my shoulder. The chain-link fence here was stronger than the yards, thicker posts, tighter mesh, topped with spiral wire. A person could still climb it, but it would take effort. I walked along the fence line until I found the pedestrian service door. It was a solid steel door set into a fence frame, with a card reader and a mechanical key override. The card reader was dark. Power failure, or the access control panel inside had switched to backup and then died. I opened the lockbox beside the door, an industrial-grade key safe used for contractors. My fingers punched in the code automatically. The door popped open with a click. Inside were keys and a laminated sheet of emergency procedures. I grabbed the keyring labeled Maintenance and unlocked the door. When I stepped onto the facility grounds, I felt something loosen in my chest. Not relief, just a shift from exposed to layered. The main building was a low, reinforced concrete structure with minimal windows. There was a smaller admin wing with office windows, but those could be shuttered internally. A generator pad sat to one side, with a diesel tank and a sound-dampening enclosure. I moved quickly to the main entrance and used the key. The door opened into a vestibule with another internal door, 2 layers by design. I shut the outer door behind me and locked it, then moved through the second door into the building. The air inside was cool and smelled faintly of chemicals and damp concrete. The hum of pumps was absent. The facility was down. I did what I always did at a new site. I located the electrical room. The main switchgear was intact. The facility had a backup generator system with an automatic transfer switch, but the generator wasn't running. That meant either the generator had a fault, the fuel was empty, or the control system had shut down for safety. I checked the generator enclosure. The tank gauge showed plenty of fuel. The battery disconnect was on. The control panel display was dark. I opened the panel and checked the battery voltage with my multimeter. Low. Not dead, but low enough that it wouldn't crank. That was good news in a strange way. It meant nobody had sabotaged it. It meant the facility had simply been abandoned long enough for the battery to drain. I found a battery charger in the maintenance shop and ran an extension cord to the generator battery using a portable power pack from my van. It wasn't ideal, but it was enough to bring voltage up slowly. While it charged, I explored. The control room was the heart of the facility. Monitors, PLC panels, a SCADA interface station, radio base units, and logs. The SCADA screen was dark, but the equipment rack had signs of life. Small LEDs still blinking on a UPS unit that was likely running on its last reserve. On the wall was a binder labeled Emergency Operations. I flipped through it like it was a lifeline. Water systems aren't magic. They're chemistry, pressure, filtration, and constant monitoring. If power fails, pumps stop. If pumps stop, pressure drops. If pressure drops, contamination risk rises. The binder included steps for manual operation and safe restart. I wasn't going to restart the entire facility for the city. That was impossible alone. But I could get one thing: safe water for one person, maybe more if I found others. I located the raw water intake line. I located the filters. I found the chemical feed rooms, sodium hypochlorite for disinfection, polyaluminum chloride for coagulation in larger systems, and pH adjustment chemicals. This site was a smaller unit, designed to boost and maintain quality, not to treat from scratch like a massive plant, but it still had storage and test kits. In the lab area, I found a basic water testing kit: chlorine residual test strips, turbidity tube, pH strips, and a small handheld meter. I also found bottled water in an emergency cabinet, cases meant for staff during outages. I sat down on the control room floor back against the cabinet and let myself breathe. That first day at the facility, I made a rule: every action must buy time, reduce risk, or improve information. No busy work, no panic projects. So I secured the building. I checked every exterior door and confirmed it locked. I pulled internal shutters down over the admin windows. I used zip ties and duct tape to create simple tamper indicators, little seals that would break if a door was opened. Not because tape stops entry, but because tape tells the truth when you're alone. Then I worked on power. By late afternoon, the generator battery voltage was up enough to attempt to start. I checked oil, coolant, and fuel lines. Everything looked stable. I pressed the start button. The generator cranked slowly at first, then caught, and the diesel engine settled into a steady roar behind its sound enclosure. A moment later, inside the building, I heard the familiar clunk of the automatic transfer switch shifting load. Lights flickered on. The control room monitors lit up. Fans started. The building came alive with the low mechanical sound of systems waking up. I didn't cheer. I just stood there, hand resting on the metal rack, and listened for any sound that meant failure. Nothing failed. For the first time since morning, I felt like I had a foothold. That foothold lasted until nightfall, when the outside world reminded me that power is visible. Light leaks, sound carries. A running generator is a beacon. Around 9 p.m., I heard the first impact against the fence. It wasn't a bang like someone throwing something. It was a dull thud, followed by the scrape of hands on metal. I turned off interior lights and moved to a high corner window slit in the service corridor, a narrow, reinforced window designed for security. Outside, under the facility's perimeter lights, I saw figures at the fence line. They were there because the lights were on. They were there because the generator hummed. They pressed forward. At first, it was only 3 or 4, leaning into the fence like tired people leaning into a subway pole. Then more arrived, drawn by the movement and the sound. The group thickened. They didn't climb. They didn't test the latch. They simply pushed. The fence bowed slightly. I watched the posts. The fence was engineered for wind loads and human tampering, not for a constant crowd. I made another decision. I went back to the generator enclosure and shut it down. The facility went dark. The perimeter lights faded. The hum stopped. Outside, the figures continued pushing for a minute, then began to drift as if the invisible thread pulling them had snapped. They weren't hunting in the way people imagine. They were responding to stimulus, noise, light, motion. I waited in darkness for an hour, listening to the scrape and thud diminish. That became my rhythm. Power in brief controlled bursts, darkness as default. During the day, I ran the generator long enough to charge internal UPS units, recharge my portable battery packs, and pump water into internal storage tanks. I used the lab kit to verify chlorine residual when I dosed small batches, careful not to overdo it. Disinfection isn't about dumping chemicals. It's about the controlled concentration and contact time. Too little does nothing. Too much creates its own problems. I used gravity wherever possible. I filled containers and stored them in the coolest part of the building to slow spoilage. I marked each container with date and time using a marker. At night, I lived like a person hiding from a storm. I ate quietly. I moved carefully. I listened. On the third day, the radio brought me my first human connection. I'd been scanning through channels with one of the UHF handhelds, mostly hearing static and distant fragments, when a clear voice came through on a frequency I didn't recognize. It sounded like someone using a base station with better antenna height. Anyone receiving, this is Kira at the Camden Loft. Repeating, Kira at the Camden Loft. We have 4 people. We have limited water. We can see movement on the bridge approaches. If anyone can advise safe route or water access, respond. Camden. Across the river. I sat up so fast my back cracked against the wall. I keyed my handheld and kept my voice low. Kira, this is Nate. I'm in a secured utility facility north of the river corridor. I have water access and limited power. I can't offer transport right now, but I can share information. What's your position and what are you seeing? There was a pause. Then her voice returned, sharper with relief. Nate? Okay. We're on the 5th floor of an old warehouse conversion near the waterfront. We have roof access. We're seeing groups moving north along main streets, not random. They're dense near intersections, like they get stuck and then keep pressing. We had someone try to get into the building last night, not talking, just pushing the lobby door until the glass cracked. My stomach tightened. Do not let them build pressure on any door. If you can, block the lobby with heavy furniture and create a maze, not a single barrier. Single barriers fail. I get it, she said. We have a forklift in the loading bay, but we can't run it without drawing them. Smart, I said. Noise is a magnet. Keep dark at night. During day, short bursts only. Do you have any radios besides that base station? Just handhelds. This base station was from a security company that used to rent here. We have a car battery on an inverter. I thought quickly. Conserve that. If you can get water from rooftop rain catchment, do it. Filter if you can. Boil if you have safe way, but don't create smoke. If you can't boil, use small disinfection doses if you have unscented household bleach, only if you know the concentration. If you don't guess. Safer to boil in a covered pot on an electric hot plate during daylight if your inverter can handle it, but watch load. She exhaled. You sound like you've done this. I fix building systems, I said. Turns out, that's useful now. We spoke for 15 minutes, trading details like we were building a map from scraps. She told me her group included a retired transit operator named Glenn, a nursing student named Maya, and a quiet guy named Patrick, who hadn't said much. They'd barricaded stairwells and used the roof to watch the riverfront. I told her about the facility, about controlled power and water, about pressure waves. We agreed on check-in times, twice a day, brief, low-power transmissions. When the radio went quiet, I felt the absence like a weight. I didn't want to be alone. But I also knew the truth. People can be salvation or danger, and the difference is planning. On day 5, planning got tested. I was doing a daylight generator run, keeping it short, when I heard a new sound, an engine, closer than it should be. A vehicle rolled up outside the facility fence. I killed the generator immediately and moved to the window slit. A white utility pickup had stopped near the gate. 2 people climbed out. They looked normal. That's what terrified me. Normal people meant decisions, desperation, and unknown intentions. One of them, a man in a reflective vest, walked to the gate and rattled it. He shouted something I couldn't hear clearly through the building's insulation. The second person, a woman with her hair pulled tight under a cap, scanned the fence line like she understood threats. I didn't open the gate. I didn't announce myself. I watched. The man stepped back and cupped his hands around his mouth. This time, I heard him. Hello? Anybody here? We saw lights. We're looking for water. We're not armed. We're just... Please. I stayed still, fighting the instinct to respond. Then I remembered the principle. Information is survival. I keyed my handheld radio and moved to the facility's external intercom panel near the door. The intercom was dead, but the building had an old loudspeaker system used for staff announcements. It ran on internal power. I didn't have internal power. But I had a handheld megaphone in the emergency cabinet, cheap plastic, battery-operated. I took it, stepped into the vestibule behind the inner door, and spoke through the outer door without opening it. Step away from the fence, I said. Hands visible. State your names and why you're here. Silence. Then the woman called back, voice steady. I'm Lacey. That's Tom. We work for the city. Water department. We've been checking sites. We're out of bottled water and we can't get to the main plant. We saw your generator run. City water department? That could be true. It could also be a lie. I asked, what's the color of the control room door inside this facility? Tom answered immediately without hesitation. Blue. Industrial blue, with a small window that never gets cleaned. My breath caught. That was correct. That was specific in the way only someone who'd been inside would know. I asked another question. What's posted on the wall by the lab sink? Lacey answered, a laminated sign about flushing eye wash stations weekly, and a yellow spill response poster. Also correct. I didn't open the gate yet, but my mind shifted. If they were truly water department staff, they understood these systems. They might bring skills. They might also bring risk. I needed to see their condition. I needed to see their hands. I needed a controlled entry. I said, go back to your truck. Leave it running if you want. Place your hands on the hood, palms down. Do not approach the fence again. Tom started to protest. then stopped. They did as told. I moved fast. I went to the security closet and grabbed a set of disposable coveralls and nitrile gloves. Not because gloves are magic, but because barrier discipline matters. Then I went to the pedestrian door, unlocked it, stepped outside into the fenced entry area, and relocked it behind me. I stayed inside the fence line, with the gate between us, the chain link a layer. "Show me your arms," I said. "Any injuries?" Tom lifted his sleeves. No visible marks. Lacey did the same. She looked tired, eyes ringed dark, but focused. "We haven't been close to them," Lacey said. "We've been moving smart. We have a route that avoids dense streets." "Why here?" I asked. "Because this site has a well-fed intake and storage," she said. "And because if it stays down, the surrounding zone loses pressure when things come back. We're trying to keep options open." She talked like infrastructure, not like panic. I made a decision based on a cold equation. 2 skilled people could increase my survival chances if I controlled the risk. I guided them into the vestibule one at a time, having them remove outer layers, sanitize hands with what little I had, and stay in the vestibule while I kept the inner door closed. I wasn't doing theater. I was doing process. Once they were inside, with the outer door locked again, I let myself look at them properly. Tom was in his late 30s, broad-shouldered, with the posture of someone used to carrying heavy things. His reflective vest was dirty, but not torn. Lacey was early 40s, lean with eyes that didn't waste movement. She carried a small backpack and a radio clipped to her belt. "We're not here to take over," she said immediately, reading the tension. "We're here to stay alive and keep water alive if we can. Those goals line up." I nodded slowly. "Rules," I said. "We keep power runs short. We keep dark at night. We don't draw pressure to the fence. We don't open doors unless we have to. We don't bring people here unless we can control entry. If you can't follow that, you leave." Tom swallowed. "We can follow." Lacey just nodded once. We've been living by rules for days. That evening, we sat in the control room and traded knowledge like currency. They told me what they'd seen across the city. Major corridors clogged with stalled vehicles, emergency services overwhelmed early and then thinning out, pockets of people barricaded in buildings, and, most importantly, movement patterns. "It's like they follow density," Tom said. "If a crowd forms, it grows. If a crowd grows, it pushes. Doors don't hold when 10 bodies lean, and then more lean, and then more." Lacey added, "We saw a shopping center entrance fail without a single person trying. They just kept pressing. The glass didn't shatter explosively. It bowed, cracked, and then the frame popped loose. The pressure did it." That confirmed my fear. Barriers weren't about strength. They were about preventing pressure from building. We discussed how to manage the facility perimeter. We decided on a strategy. Keep perimeter lights off at night, run generator only during midday for brief intervals, and if we needed longer run times, do it during high ambient noise periods, like when distant alarms were already drawing movement elsewhere. We also set up an internal, quiet protocol. No loud conversations near doors. No dropped tools. No unnecessary radio chatter. Over the next week, the facility became a living machine. Tom inspected and reinforced fence posts with scrap angle iron from the maintenance shop, bolting braces at stress points. He was good with his hands, steady and practical. He moved like someone who'd been useful his whole life and wasn't ready to stop. Lacey brought the kind of knowledge you can't fake. She understood water quality, contact time, residuals, and how to keep small-scale dosing safe. She showed me how to use the test kit properly instead of relying on my half-remembered instincts. And she asked the hard questions. "What's your long-term plan, Nate?" she said one morning as we watched the perimeter through the window slit. I didn't have a good answer. "Stay alive," I said. "That's the short plan," she replied. "Long plan is what happens when fuel runs out, when the fence fails, when the pressure wave comes here because something louder nearby goes quiet." I stared at the fence line where the chain link glinted in daylight. "I don't know," I admitted. She nodded, not judging. "Then we build one." That's when I began to think beyond the building. We couldn't stay forever, but we could use the facility as a base to gather information and supplies, and to build a route, like technicians do when they plan service calls, predictable, repeatable, low risk. Tom suggested a hardware supply warehouse 2 miles away where he'd once picked up pipe fittings. Lacey suggested a municipal operations depot where there might be fuel and spare batteries. I suggested an HVAC supply house with filters, duct tape, and perhaps portable fans and chargers. We planned each trip like a job. We mapped approach routes using paper maps from the admin office. We identified choke points. We decided on times of day when movement seemed lower, late morning when the pressure waves drifted toward louder districts, and early afternoon when sunlight and heat seemed to slow them slightly. We used the facility's rooftop access to observe patterns. From up there, we could see distant intersections where clusters formed, then migrated. It wasn't random. They pushed forward toward stimulus, and stimulus traveled. A car alarm would pull them down a corridor like water down a gutter. When it stopped, they'd drift, but not disperse fully, like they retained momentum. One day, we saw something that changed how we thought. A group was moving along a service road, steady, dense. Ahead of them was nothing obvious, no siren, no flashing lights, yet they moved like they had a destination. Tom squinted through binoculars. "What are they going toward?" Then we heard it faintly. A generator hum, far off, buried under wind. Someone else had power. And the dead, no, the infected pressure wave was flowing toward it. That's when the title in my head became a warning, not a dramatic phrase. The dead push forward, and they push toward whatever we build that looks like life. That night, Kira radioed in from Camden. Her voice sounded different, tight, controlled fear. "Nate, we had pressure at the lobby again," she said. "Not a lot, but enough. We kept dark, we kept quiet, but they still came." I exchanged a look with Lacey. We were sitting in the control room with the generator off, lights dimmed. "What changed?" I asked. Kira hesitated. "We heard a lot of noise nearby, like a group of people tried to drive through. There was an engine revving, then crashing. Then they started coming. Like the noise pulled them, and then they kept coming even after it stopped." I said, "Do you have any way to redirect them? Any sound source you can place away from the building?" "We thought about it," she said, "but anything loud feels like inviting trouble." "It is," I admitted. "But sometimes redirecting pressure is the only option. If you can create a controlled noise at a distance, something that runs briefly and then stops, you might pull them away long enough to relieve the door." Lacey leaned toward the radio and spoke calmly. "Kira, listen. Do not use anything that will keep running. short, controlled, and do it only in daylight if you can. The goal is to move the pressure, not to create a new problem. Kira exhaled. Okay, we'll think. After the call, Lacey looked at me. We should go get them. Tom's head snapped around. Across the bridge? It's not about kindness, she said, voice flat. It's about numbers and skill. They have a forklift, they have roof access, they have another base station. If they fall, we lose information and potential allies. And if we're planning a long-term route out, we'll need more than 3 people. Tom frowned. And if we bring them here, we bring risk. I didn't answer immediately because both were right. Then I said, we don't bring them here. Both of them stared at me. I continued. We build a second node. We pick a site that's easier to defend without drawing pressure to this facility. A warehouse with fewer visible lights, thick doors, multiple exits. If we can connect nodes, we're not one failure away from ending. Lacey's expression softened slightly. Now you're thinking long-term. Tom rubbed his jaw. Where? My mind went to a place I'd serviced once, long before any of this. A cold storage distribution facility. Thick, insulated walls, heavy doors, backup power infrastructure, and interior space to create layers. If power was available even briefly, cold storage also bought time for food. It was also, by design, built to handle trucks and loading docks, meaning it had multiple points of entry, which was both good and bad. But most importantly, it was away from the densest residential streets. I said, there's a cold storage place near the industrial belt, closer to the bridge approach, but not on the main corridor. If it's still intact, it could be a node. Tom nodded slowly. I know the type. Those doors are serious, Lacey said, and if it has roof access, we can observe patterns. We spent 2 days preparing. We didn't do dramatic weapon talk. We did practical loadouts, gloves, goggles, hard hats, radios, water, a small handcart, bolt cutters, and a compact toolkit. We packed snack food. We packed spare batteries. We planned for silence. We also prepared something that felt strange but necessary. Controlled diversion. Tom rigged a small portable alarm using a battery and a timer relay from the electrical shop. Nothing complex, just a device that could emit a high-frequency beeping for 5 minutes and then stop. The goal wasn't to create a constant beacon. It was to pull pressure away from our path if we got pinned. On the morning we left, the sky was gray and low, the kind of day that makes the world feel smaller. We drove in the van with windows up, engine quiet, radios on low volume. The city on the route looked like a paused video. Cars at odd angles, trash scattered, a billboard still flashing a half-lit advertisement like a failing heartbeat. We avoided intersections where clusters formed. We took service roads. We stopped twice to let pressure waves drift past. At one point, we saw a group pressed against the glass doors of a closed storefront. Not pounding, not raging, just leaning, pushing forward with slow insistence. The doors bowed. The frame held, for now. Tom whispered, "That's what they do." When we reached the cold storage facility, my throat tightened. The main yard gate was partially open, as if someone had left in a hurry. The loading docks were quiet. No trucks moving. We didn't drive in. We parked down the road behind a concrete barrier and approached on foot, using parked trailers as cover. The facility's main entry door was shut. No lights visible, no sound. Tom checked the perimeter fence. "No obvious pressure here," he murmured. Lacey pointed to the roof line. "No movement." I found a side door with a mechanical lock. It had a key override and an electronic access reader. The reader was dead. I used my pry bar carefully, not forcing the door but testing it. It was locked solid. Then I saw the contractor lockbox, same style as the water facilities, mounted on the wall. Most industrial sites use them. I didn't know this code, but I knew how companies set codes when they're lazy. I tried the facility's street number. No. I tried a common default. No. Tom shook his head. We can't stand here. If we make noise. Lacey held up a hand and pointed to the loading dock. Door curtain, those rubber seals. If the internal dock door is down but not latched, we might slip in quietly. We moved toward the dock, staying low behind concrete bumpers. A semi-trailer sat backed into one bay, doors shut. In the next bay, the dock shelter's rubber flaps hung loose. The overhead door was down, but a small gap showed beneath it, just enough to see darkness inside. Tom knelt, listened, then slipped his fingers under the door and lifted gently. The door moved, heavy but not locked. We raised it just enough to slide under, one at a time, keeping it as quiet as possible. Inside, the loading bay smelled like cold rubber and dust. The interior dock door was shut, but the handle turned. It opened into a corridor of insulated walls and heavy doors. Cold storage. Lacey exhaled. Okay. We moved through the facility, checking rooms. Most were dark, but emergency lights glowed faintly in places, powered by small battery packs. We found the electrical room. We found a generator pad outside through a reinforced door. The generator enclosure was intact. Then Tom found something that made him freeze. In the admin office, a laptop sat open on a desk. The screen was dark, but the keyboard had dust disturbed like someone had used it recently. And beside the laptop was a handwritten note. Not safe here at night. They come when the trucks do. Tom read it out loud. His voice sounded wrong in the quiet. They come when the trucks do, Lacey repeated softly, meaning noise, meaning engines. I felt the air shift, like the building itself carried the memory of pressure waves drawn to diesel and metal. We didn't stay long. We confirmed what mattered. The site had layers, heavy doors, storage space, and a generator. But it also had multiple loading docks, many potential weak points. We marked it as a possible node, not a sure refuge. Then we left the way we came. Careful, quiet. On the return trip, we saw why the node existed. A pressure wave moved along the main truck route, dense and steady, drawn by distant engine noise. Maybe a vehicle still running. Maybe an automated backup generator somewhere. They weren't running, but they were relentless. They pushed forward down the corridor of asphalt like water obeying slope. We waited behind a concrete wall and watched them pass, hundreds of bodies moving in a slow tide. Tom whispered, "If that hits a loading dock door." "It won't stop," I said. "Not until the door fails or the sound moves." That night, back at the water facility, we made a real long-term plan. 2 nodes. 3, if possible. Short controlled power. Dark nights. Water as our anchor. And then the hard part. Movement between nodes must be possible without crossing pressure corridors. We drew a map on the control room whiteboard. Rivers, industrial belts, rail lines, major intersections where pressure accumulated. We marked safe-ish roads, back service roads, fenced perimeters, drainage corridors under certain overpasses, and one crucial feature I knew from my old job: utility easements. Utility easements cut through the city like hidden corridors. Narrow strips behind buildings where power lines water lines, and service access roads ran. They were ugly, often overgrown, but they were also less populated and less noisy. They didn't have storefronts, intersections, or bright signage. They were the kind of places I'd walked many times to reach a rooftop unit or a transformer. They could be our arteries. Over the next 2 weeks, we turned the facility into a command center. We scheduled short recon walks along easements, always in daylight, all hallways with an exit plan. We documented what we saw in a logbook, which streets had dense movement, which areas were quiet, which locations acted like magnets. We learned patterns. Hospitals were constant magnets. Big grocery stores became magnets after the first wave of panic because alarms, broken glass, and leftover noise lingered. Transit hubs were magnets because people gathered there early and never fully cleared. We also learned something that felt almost impossible. Sometimes the pressure waves moved without an obvious stimulus. They moved as if drawn by the memory of where humans used to be. Tom called it habit momentum. Lacey called it residual patterning. I called it terrifying. Then, on a day 19 at the facility, we got a transmission that made all our careful planning feel small. It came through the radio in a calm male voice using what sounded like a professional base station with good power and antenna height. This is Station 9. Repeating, Station 9. If you can hear this, do not attempt main highways. Pressure corridors are active. Repeat. Pressure corridors are active. If you are operating independently, establish darkness discipline. Light and sound draw them. If you have water access, protect it. I grabbed the radio so hard my knuckles hurt. Station 9, this is Nate. Identify location and capability. A pause. Then the voice returned. Nate, we copy. We are operating from a hardened municipal site. We cannot share exact location over open channel. We are monitoring multiple bands. If you are a utility operator, confirm system type. Lacey leaned in. Tell him. I spoke steadily. We are at a water infrastructure facility with backup generator capability. We are running intermittent power to maintain internal storage and safe water. 3 personnel. We have contact with a group in Camden. Another pause. The voice came back, and this time I heard something like approval. Copy. You are doing it right. Listen carefully. The pressure is increasing in predictable bands. When a corridor becomes active, it stays active longer each day. They are not dissipating like before, they are layering. Layering. That word hit me like a weight. The dead push forward, and now they weren't just moving, they were accumulating. Station 9 continued. We believe this is driven by diminishing alternative stimulus. As the city goes dark, any remaining power sources, alarms, and human movement become stronger attractors. Reduce your signature. If you must run generators, do it when ambient noise is already high or when weather masks sound. Lacey mouthed. Weather. I asked, do you have guidance on relocation? Safe zones? Station 9's voice stayed calm. We cannot direct traffic, but we can advise. Avoid bridges during daylight. Avoid tunnels. Avoid stadium zones and hospitals. Use industrial belts and utility easements where possible. Maintain redundancy. 1 site is none. 2 sites is 1. 3 sites is survival. Tom exhaled slowly like he'd been holding air for days. When the transmission ended, we sat in silence. Then Lacey said quietly, We need Kira's group on our map, not in this building, but in our network. Tom nodded. And we need a third node. I looked at the whiteboard and felt the world shift again. I used to think of survival as a shelter. Now I understood it as a system. A system has inputs and outputs. It has failures. It has backups. It has monitoring. It has discipline. And it has one enemy that does not negotiate: pressure. The dead push forward, and they don't stop because you ask nicely. They stop only when stimulus changes, barriers hold long enough for them to drift, or when they run out of space to press into. We started building our third node the next morning. Not with grand construction. With careful choices. We chose a municipal operations depot, an old public works yard with garages, fuel storage, heavy equipment, and, crucially, thick roll-up doors that could be reinforced from inside. Tom had worked near 1 year ago. Lacey knew the kind of systems they had. We approached it using easements and back roads, moving in daylight with silence discipline. When we reached it, we found the gate locked but intact. No signs of pressure waves, no clusters. Inside the fence we saw the prize, a fuel tank, clearly labeled, with a protected pump station. We didn't rush it. We checked for movement. We listened. The yard was quiet. We got inside the way infrastructure people always do, through a maintenance access point designed for service, not for crowds. Tom found the lockbox, and this time the code worked on the first try. The yard's street number. Inside, we found keys to garages, a storage room with tools, and a small office with a generator transfer panel. We checked power. Down, of course. But there was a portable generator in the corner and several fuel cans. Tom looked at me. "We can run it?" I shook my head. "Not yet. First we secure the yard. We create layers. We keep it dark until we're ready." We spent the day doing exactly that. Reinforcing interior doors, blocking windows, setting up simple noise traps, hanging loose metal that would clink if disturbed, placing gravel strips in choke points to make footsteps audible. It wasn't a fortress, but it was a third node. When we returned to the water facility that evening, Kira checked in. Her voice sounded exhausted, but still steady. "We tried your idea," she said. "Short diversion. 5 minutes. It worked." They drifted away from the lobby. I felt relief so sharp it surprised me. "Good," I said. "No longer than necessary, only daylight." She paused. "Nate, we saw something else. On the street below, a group pushed forward against a storefront door until it failed, and then they kept going. They didn't stop to search. They just flowed through like a wave." I swallowed. "That's what they do. They're pressure, not planning." She went quiet, then said, Are you building something?" "Yes," I said. "A network. Nodes. If you can move, we can integrate your position into the network, not to bring you into danger, so you're not alone on an island." Kira's breath hit the mic. "Okay, tell me what to do." I glanced at Lacey and Tom. We were all listening. I said, "First, you map your nearest utility easements and industrial routes. Avoid main roads. Avoid bridges during daylight. If the pressure corridor is active, you wait. You do not fight pressure head-on. You let it move past. We'll guide you in steps." I could hear her swallowing fear. "Okay." That was the moment the story stopped being about a man hiding in a building and became about something else. Systems. Because systems can outlast panic. Over the following days, we began the slow work of moving Kira's group, one short hop at a time, from rooftop observation to easement travel. from silence discipline to controlled daylight movement. We didn't do hero runs. We did cautious, repeatable operations. Some days, they couldn't move at all because pressure corridors stayed active for hours. On those days, we didn't push them. We taught them how to read the streets, listen for distant engines, watch where clusters form, recognize when a corridor is loading like a pip filling. Other days, they moved a few blocks and stopped in a secure stairwell. They rested, they stayed dark, they waited. The dead pushed forward. So did we, just smarter, quieter, and with a plan. And I learned the most important survival lesson of all. You don't outrun pressure. You root around it, bleed it off, and refuse to become its destination.